I know the ask at the last meeting was about, can we do something about rents, just to give you kind of a better feel for what's involved in the rent setting, what considerations are there. And then we've got a board meeting on 10th of December. So board will be going through this and making the decision, and then that becomes what the rent increase is for next year. So I thought it might be helpful to kind of just do a bit of a bring you up to speed, kind of, I suppose, with the different types of rents, but also how the rent is actually set. So you've got a bit of an idea of kind of what sort of control there is over it and what other considerations we have to do. So, if that's only me that can see the people. Okay, so obviously social housing rent, you mentioned earlier actually just then about the allocations and what can the council do maybe in terms of reducing sizes and allocations. But social housing rent is only the rent that's charged by a council or a housing association. It is designed to be more affordable, obviously, than private rent. And the whole point of it is supposed to be that it's allowing a secure long-term housing structure. So it's not like a private landlord. We've got loads more controls over people being in the properties, as Asim has just been talking about, but also even about sort of obviously people moving on, etc. as well. So other than a private product, it's very much designed about this is long-term housing for the sector. So we've got two types though of rent. So social housing rent is probably the majority of our tenants. So you'll see as I come on, I've been giving you sort of some numbers for a bit of an idea of what the difference is, but most of our tenants are on social rent, and that's really prescriptive. It's set by the government, and without boring you to tears, I have put an example in just so you've got a feel for actually how do we get to that rent, and how much of it is actually designed in terms of the way that it's set. But the idea of it is obviously about fairness and consistency across all property types. So if you're anywhere around the West Yorkshire area, and it does go back to postcode as well, then your rent shouldn't be massively dissimilar. For say in Chapeltown, 3-bed rents should be relatively similar. 3-bed rents in Moortown should be similar. 3-bed rents in parts of Huddersfield. So the idea is to actually try and create a bit of consistency. And it was also about trying to standardise rents across councils and housing associations. But they have there's not the same sort of regime around private rented, which is why the rents are so much higher generally. And the social rent as well doesn't include the service charge, because obviously some properties have a service charge, some don't. So social rent is only a formula for the actual rent part. And the reason that becomes important is because we also then have affordable rents. So this came in a much newer period, really, from about 2011 onwards, and it was linked with the time when the government said to some associations, the only way you're building is if you can get a higher rent. So they allowed either rent convergence, if organisations actually bid for that and said, we want to change our properties, that when they come up for rent, we'll move them to this affordable rent. And the big difference is it's up to 80% of the market rent. So one of them's very prescriptive and set as a social rent, the other one is up to 80%. So organisations have a bit of flexibility at the point they develop, and we've got a number of schemes where we didn't go up to the full 80, we went to 72% on some, 60 on others, 80 on others. It just depended on where they were. But also that consideration of affordability was sort of taken into account. But the big difference is affordable rents include service charge. So a lot of them, for us, generally speaking, affordable rents are houses. But if they were a flat, and we've got a few, the service charge is part of that. So although the same increase applies, one of them's with a service charge and one's without. And then the secure rent, some of you might have heard of this before, fair rents, if you've lived with the council, say, for a long time. Many years ago, I had a rent that we went to the fair rent office and had assessed as well. So Unity only ever had a couple of those, and actually the last one's gone. And generally speaking, they're kind of dying away now, because you had to be in your property before 1989 for this to apply. So obviously, generally speaking, it's at the old sort of end of tenancies.
Race and favour homes as well.
Yeah, some of those that were in. So different types, but it's important because it's then around sort of how we set those rents going forward.
People bidding for properties.
Yeah.
So I want to go and live in Harrogate.
Yeah.
Right. So I'd come under the affordable rent. But how would
it would depend on the property?
So how would I know if it's best for me to go to Harrogate,
right,
or to stay in where I am? from a rent point of view, because obviously I'm gonna go for where the rent's cheaper than more
Yeah.
expensive, so how would you do that?
I'm going to go to Alan on this because I don't know at the point you're allocated, doesn't show the rent there.
We do share the rent and we break down what the rent is and we break down what the service charge is. We also break down what is eligible service charge, which means what you'll get funded through your benefit, for an example, if you was housing benefit or universal credit. And then we break down what you wouldn't be eligible for under the service charge. So for an example, some people have gardening and window cleaning or communal cleaning. If you was an affordable rent, that would get covered. Yeah. But if you was a social rent, you'd have to make up that amount yourself. Yeah. So you ask those questions, but if you don't have this knowledge, you wouldn't know. You just think, right, okay, that's my rent, that's my service charge, and it'll get paid. But it's good to be going back to I don't even think we go to the extent of actually telling the tenant, oh well, it's an affordable rent, it's a social rent. I think it's more when we do the tenancy agreement that the tenant gets to see. But that question very rarely comes up, to be quite honest.
Is
Because I'm bidding for a property and I'm looking for where I'd like to live. I'm not thinking, oh God, this rent's going to cost me an extra £200 because it's where I'd like to live.
Because it's an affordable rent.
Yeah. And that's what I'm asking.
Well, you'll see when I come onto the table as well what the sort of difference is in terms of the types of sizes and locations and whether it's assured or affordable. Because I've put that in because I thought it might be helpful to sort of have a see what those sort of differences are.
More related to housing providers, not social housing providers, not housing associations, because Mears Group, who are housing providers, not housing association, have affordable rent only.
So under the new definition of rent, these are actually both classed as an affordable rent. Which makes it really confusing. So on some things, people will advertise it, and they are both classed as an affordable rent because they're in the social housing sector. But it's just that one of them's a social affordable rent, and the other's an affordable rent. It's not the best. It's not the best terminology, is it? I know. Yeah, and I think the reason they do it is because they either say you're on a market rent or you're on an affordable rent. Because of that fact that the market, even on this, you can't go above 80% of market. So one of these are classed that's more affordable.
Can be quite expensive.
Yeah, they can, absolutely.
£750 a month in Horsfield for a 2-bedroom house, for example.
Right.
So that's quite. Because the area as well. Because I know. I mean, I work for Mears Group, so I know what they charge. For affordable housing rent in Horsfield. So
Yeah, well, even just there's big differentials around Leeds.
Quite a lot of money
in terms of the actual rent charge.
I think Dartford, they've got social housing rent there under Red Road Builders, which they charge just £480 for a 2-bedroom house with a huge garden. 30-foot garden.
Big difference.
Wow.
And then again, that's affordable. And those tenants actually bid via Leeds City Council housing allocation scheme under
Is affordable rent the same as affordable homes, or is that something else? You know, like when like when these developers build a lot of new builds, and then a couple of them are like.
That's right. They have to have a certain allocation for.
Is that
that's this? Well, they could be social or affordable.
Or they can be either.
It can be either, because again, they're both classed as an affordable rent. Because they're still going to be maximum of 80% of the market rent, whereas all the other properties on the scheme will be at market rent.
Yeah.
I
think so.
Yeah. That makes sense.
I would take the social rent now and put.
Well, no, because we'll come on to why it's massively different. Right. So affordable rent comes from basically they literally go and say, what's the valuation of the property? What would the market rent be? The maximum you can charge is 80% of that. Right. Relatively speaking, that's quite simple. And the market rent is what, if you went to an estate agent or anyone else, they can get
what's going in the area.
Exactly.
That's what private landlords.
What private landlords are charging. Shortage of supply, demand for it means quite often the rents will go up in some areas more than others if that's where everybody wants to live.
So 1,500 for private, and then you got the 80% of that 1,500.
Whereas the social rent, and I'll just come on to just how different it is. So the social rent is based on, and again, this is a really old system. So this all came in 2000. So this was when rent conversion started. So even now, today, the property value is valued as at what it would have been in 1999. What the earnings were in 1999, what the bedrooms multiplier is, and then it gets inflated every year by inflation. So just to hopefully try and make this a bit easier. So the government actually set most of this out. So if I'm giving you an example of how a rent would be set for a 3-bed property in Leeds, and it had a value back in 1999 of 55,000. So obviously property values have gone up massively, but you still discount it back, saying what was it in 1999? So the government actually give us what the average rent was in April 2000, what the national property value was in January 1999, what the average earnings were in West Yorkshire, what the national earnings were, and what the bedroom weighting is. So all of that bit, everything in blue there, apart from that yellow bit at the top, all of that is on a preset formula, and they give it is in one document for the whole country. So you can look at any county, anywhere across the country, and you can get this average earnings. So really, really prescriptive in terms of how it's set. Then, just to make it even more complicated, they then say the rent has to be based on 70% of that national average rent, times by the relative county earnings, times the bedroom weight, and 30% of it based on the rent times by the property value. Yeah, so this is what I mean by actually, when you say where did my rent come from, apart from that value of what that individual property is, every other bit of it is actually set under a predefined formula going right back to 1999. So I'll explain why that then comes on to being important. So basically, I've then just set out for you at the bottom. So you get 70% of it based on, as I say, the sort of the earnings bit, and 30% based on the value. £58. So if we were looking at this property back in 2000, the rent would have been £58 a week.
A 3-bed property.
For a 3-bed property.
Wow.
So then to get it to today's prices, they give us another table to then say, you've now got to apply this inflation for all these years to say, what is the rent as at today? Yeah. So if you bought a property today, or we built a property today, and we're charging social rent on it, we've still got to go right the way back to calculate what it would have been in 2000 and then apply all these inflations since that. And the government have this in a document, and every single year they publish it to say what is the latest. That's why I've gone and stuck the ones on the end there of what 25, 26 was. But what's really good about this is, and maybe it helps or doesn't because it is quite a complicated formula, but once you can follow it through, you can see all the workings on it. This is really, really transparent. All of these documents are on the website. You can look up annual rent increases, social housing rent. They've got page upon page of how this is all described in a lot more detail. I've tried to keep it sort of simple for here so you can see it for one property type. But actually, there's nothing hidden in this. This is exactly how we calculate our rents. And you'll see as we come onto the numbers, the majority of our rents are on this basis. I think what's important to point out is you can see from the 2016 through to 2019 was the 4 years of -1%. So irrespective of what had been charged previously, when the government came in, they made a blanket decision. Doesn't matter what your other costs are, whether your staffing costs are going up, your repairs costs are going up, or anything else, all of your rents have got to go down for 4 years by -1%. So that obviously was the time when there was massive change across the whole housing sector. A lot of organisations streamlined, had a look and didn't do extra services. I think Unity is one of the only ones in the area who carried on with employment services because of this, because of the change, development, etc. So big impact of what those sort of rent increases or rent reductions had. And then we obviously had another rent cap because in 23-24, inflation was 11.1%, that one at the bottom. But actually they said you can only charge 7%. So that again had quite a big impact because all of our contracts were going up by the CPI rate at the time.
COVID affected.
Well, the COVID was an impact of the -1 was just as we came out of COVID. So there's been the 4 years of that, then there was COVID. So yes, so it was a kind of a whammy at the time across a lot of businesses.
Cost of living just went through the roof.
Exactly.
Materials, everything just went through the roof.
Yeah. And up until now, there's never been any chance of basically you recovering. So that 11.1 at the bottom is, if we went to re-let a property, we can put that other formula on, and rather than 7, for everybody who stays in a property, unless you move, that won't be recovered, because essentially it's the rent each year can only go up by the CPI plus 1 or whatever the decision is, sort of following that. You're not allowed to, because you go back to 1999.
Oh, right.
So this is a really big debate. No, this is a really, really big debate in the housing sector, but also in the government, because actually they've talked about changing all the rent structure for probably the last 3 or 4 years now. But actually there's so much involved in it, and they'd have to go back and relook at how all of these rents were set, what the values were, and actually, let's be honest, all that's going to happen is it would have a knock on to the welfare bill, as well as other people's rents, that I think, to be honest, they're too scared to touch it, because it's such a big difference really in terms of the changes. So they did make a bit of a concession by saying on relet you can go back to the 11.1, whereas previously when we had all the -1s, it's if you don't charge the rent in a particular year, you can never charge it again. And you'll see after, as we come on to it now, what an impact that's had and what an impact it has going forward. And also this is them saying this is the rent we're allowing you to charge, because they literally set it all out and say this is what we're suggesting. So who overlooks this really? So obviously we have the regulator of social housing. They have to ensure we've got these policies being applied, and every year we have to send a return in to say this is all the rents we charged last year compared to the previous year. So they're actually checking that people are applying the right increases. So there's a bit of self-regulation in terms of an organisation, but there's also the regulators checking every single year for an average rent on every single property you've got across the business. We have to send a return in on. So obviously that's quite a big check, and they've just published it. Actually, they do an average kind of every year. What does it look like? Obviously, government are involved in terms of making the decisions, and obviously we've got to follow those rules in terms of what we do.
As well as having a regulator, would the auditors come and make sure that step by step before you send it to the regulators that's gone through and it's right, or do you not? That double whammy.
Yeah, we won't bring them in every year. I think it's good practice to have them look at it every so often in terms of how you've done returns.
So it's 3 years, I mean, I don't mean every year.
Yeah. So every so often they will come and look at, say, how it's been set. They look at developments to say you've got brand new development. Did you charge the right rent on it? That's audited under a sort of separate regime. So there are a number of sort of checks and balances in there. And we went to audit committee actually last year and said we'd found, I think, 3 properties that there was an error on, but going back about 8 years, and we just decided to go and have another check in the meantime, and luckily most of them had gone through the relet process.
That's good.
But it's just that to go back and do an extra kind of check.
Is it to make it charge the wrong rent?
I mean, this is where there's controls, isn't there, in the system in terms of saying, so for every property, you're literally going back and go and apply it, check it, does it look reasonable? And before, this is partly why we get even housing officers check the rents each year before the letters go out, to make sure that they can see on our rent letters what was charged last year, what's charged this year, does it look like? So we've got multiple checks in the system between IT loading it, housing officers saying, does it look reasonable, checks within sort of the finance team. Because it's really important that we get this right. It has such a knock on for everybody. So obviously, as you said there, we have the rent reductions, we've got the CPI. So what the government have now proposed is that from April 26, they bring back 10 years of CPI plus 1. So we've reached a point where that we had no indication of what the next rent increases were going to be. Because they'd set this policy originally for 10 years. We'd had rent reductions in the middle of that 10-year sort of position. And then we had for 25-26, they gave us 1 year of, we'll give you CPI plus 1 while we think about it. So they've now announced that there's a 10-year policy. So they go up by CPI plus 1. But the reason being because they want associations to start developing again and do a lot more of not just investing in properties, but also building properties. It's all over the press, isn't it? All the issues about shortage of sort of social housing.
So you're trying to up your coffers, really, aren't you?
Yeah, to be able to build alongside that. And then they're also talking about, and this is quite new really, there's a consultation at the moment on rent convergence. So I say there hasn't been rent convergence for donkey's years really since this came in. So it's basically making your rents go back. So you basically did all those formulas that you could see. If we had a property where somebody hasn't moved, then, like we said, you'd have been charged 7% rent increase, not 11.1. So they're talking about, and some associations in other years decided not to apply the rent increase at the time. So you could have a target rent of say £100, but actually you're currently charging 85, or something like that. So convergence is basically trying to get the two back together again, which is where this came from originally. As I say, it was originally a 10-year policy from 2000 to 2010 to try and get all rents to standardise.
So from 2026, 10-year policy, you mean that every year they do the CPI
plus one, yeah.
Every year, you do, that's what you mean
yeah.
by that, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And then on top of that, there's this, is there an extra convergence? So you do CPI plus one, plus another, say, £1 a week. Or
and the CPI, what is that every year? Is it like 4 points something?
No, so interestingly, it's even been negative in the past.
So the CPI changes, does it?
Yes, so every year, so each of these CPIs are everything from 3.3, 1.7, back in 2010. This, sorry.
Oh, inflation.
Yeah, the inflation column. So it was negative that year. It's, you can see it's been up and down really like a yo-yo. And obviously at the moment they were predicting that we should be back at 2%. So government policy is that inflation should be 2%. That's the aim, that's the long-term aim. You can see from this, it's been a bit hit and miss really in terms of trying to aim for that. And it's driving it is prices. So in the press, so they always announce the rent increase for this in September. So that was published last week. So it comes out about 4 weeks after the end of the month. So it's always September CPI that drives the social rents. What I haven't said on here is shared owners. They have a separate lease. So their lease depends on when the property was originally built, because they've got a separate clause. And with every different, I think we've got 31 shared ownership properties left. And I would say we've got 8 different types of agreements, different types of clauses, because of when they were built. They've all got different rent inflators, they've got different months, different percentages, whatever. So they're all individually calculated each year, because they're just all different. So but say on a lease, you've got to go back to the lease terms because they were taken out at the time. Whereas these ones, so the CPI is driven by things like house prices, food prices, energy prices. So all the things that are basically having a big impact in terms of cost of living for everybody have been all the things that are also driving that CPI.
Like as I said about getting materials in, repairs, etc.,
etc. Yeah, and when there's been crises around the world, so as soon as we had Brexit, that had an impact. As soon as we had the war in Ukraine, that's had a massive impact because a lot of supplies came from there. When there was a blockage in the Suez Canal, no one could get any materials, you couldn't get doors for days. So it's all these things that then the harder it is for a supplier to get materials into the country, the more the price goes up because it's cost them more to deliver it.
I'm going to milk it for everybody that can.
So big impact really on that in terms of the rents. So where are we currently? I thought, in fact, I'll show you first what the impact is on rents, and then I'll show you our current position in terms of where we are for payments. So this is unity stock. So across the whole, so the top is the assured.
Make that a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
It's going to be some more drink. All right.
No, thank you.
Let me see if I can get rid of that side, and then you can actually see it better. Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah. So you can see on here, we've got, obviously we haven't got as many properties in Huddersfield. That's our kind of growing area. And you can see that by this, we've only got 10 assured homes in Huddersfield, which kind of makes sense because the newer ones we've built when they've been just houses have been on the affordables. So we've got a few more that are affordable. And then you can see our biggest stock number is 2-bed properties in Leeds. So we've got 400 okay, so you can see these here. So we've got 431 2-beds. That is our biggest number of properties. And after that, it's obviously 1 and 3 beds. So that's our biggest number of stock really. But it just gives you a bit of an idea of what kind of stock we've got and where it is between Leeds and Huddersfield. So what I've done then on the right is just give you the difference between what if we charged the CPI plus 1, that would mean it would be a 4.8% increase for next year. Right. What's the impact per week per size of property? And what is it if it was at CPI? So it adds really about £1 a week's difference. It's the difference between doing CPI or CPI plus one.
Okay.
Just gives you a bit of an idea there. Sort of look at it's obviously slightly more on the other properties, but it sort of averages around £1. But on the affordables, because obviously the rent is higher, it's slightly higher. So on the affordables, it's about £1.50 difference a week.
Shared ownership.
Yes, bottom.
I've shared ownerships in there as well.
No, so because these shared ownerships, theirs is different because they're not even on CPI. A lot of them are on RPI because they were older. So we've got a few that would be on this on a sort of CPI plus one increase.
Yeah.
But some of them, retail price index was the old index before it became consumer price index, and it's always slightly higher.
Sure.
Than CPI, and a lot of theirs as well have things like a RPI plus one or RPI plus four, or and most of them don't use September, they use November, December, and February. So it just depends. Again, you'll see it like last year, the increase was 1.9%, but the month before it had been 3%. The month after it was 3%. In September, it just happened to be the lowest, which was obviously good for rents last year for people because it was the lower part of CPI. But it's always set in September for these. So that gives you an idea of what the kind of increase would be like for next year in terms of if we went and applied the full CPI plus one, or what the impact is if it was the lower one. And then in terms of where we are currently, so this is where we are. So Fiona's just done this for us for the end of October, just to give you an idea of how many tenants, how people are currently paying, but also how many accounts have we currently got in arrears. But arrears could be because people pay at different times of the month. So obviously this is a snapshot on a certain day.
Yeah.
Like she said, one person was literally, they're ahead for 3 weeks of the month and down for one because of the timing of when they pay.
Okay.
But obviously if this is the week they've shot on this, then they're obviously in arrears. But it just gives you a bit of a context of kind of where we are in terms of payers. So DD is the direct debit. If someone's got that coming out automatically, we take the payment. We've got obviously very few people still using cash and check. Standing order, where people have set up their own with the bank in terms of how much to pay out. Now, universal credit is interesting because we've put on there, this is anyone who we get the payments directly for.
Yeah.
But on a lot of tenants, we don't know if they're getting universal credit or not, because you can have it paid. Most people, the default is to have it paid to yourself.
Yeah.
It's only if people have actually asked for us to claim it and have it direct that we know people are on universal credit.
So like they get in arrears.
Or if you get arrears,
Yeah.
we have to have a conversation separately about it. And that's why Fiona's put the number there. So we've actually confirmed rent for 733 tenants for universal credit purposes, but we've only actually ourselves got 267 that are coming directly to us.
Yeah.
And we also don't know if people
what
get the
that
housing
means
elements or not.
That when somebody makes a claim for universal credit,
Yeah.
Unity have to go into the portal and accept that that person is taking one of our tenancies. So the links are right. So we accept that person. So we've actually confirmed 733 tenants for universal credit, but only 227 of them we get directly from universal credit. The remainder will go to the tenant, and then the tenant will decide if they want to pay by direct debit or standing order.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, don't they all, like if a tenant is on universal credit, don't they all have to verify have their housing costs verified?
So we verified 733. We verified 733 universal universal credit applicants.
But 367 of them are 8 years.
Or they chose to have it paid to us, or we've applied for an app because they're not paying it. So the difference between the 733 and 276 is people that get it paid direct to them, and then they pay it to us, whether it's via direct debit or standing order.
But obviously, so we have got quite a number of people who are obviously in arrears. But obviously some of that depends on the month, and we just don't fully know. And that housing benefit as well can be either full partial payment or it could be full payment, but it's just again getting part of that. So, but at least it gives you a bit of context, because obviously it's that impact on everyone's got different circumstances, haven't they? But that rent increase is going to be the same across the board irrespective of repayment time.
You guys take it, and whatever's left is left, kind of thing, rather than getting to arrears. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what the idea was behind paying it up to.
It was, I think it was.
a choice, wasn't it?
Empower people
Yeah.
to manage.
I wondered if it was that. I
Yeah.
didn't know what
Yeah, I think it was to get people back into work, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We'll give them like a salary and then you pay everything
Yeah.
out like you're supposed to. So just be able to budget a little bit more and manage.
But not everybody can budget, that's what I
Absolutely,
mean,
yeah.
that's why you
Yeah.
can't budget.
There's
So
at
just
least
saying,
there's an
yeah,
option.
okay,
Yeah,
an option,
yeah. Yeah. Okay.
You're right then.
So I've got, yeah,
Okay.
I know it's quite complicated down here. So I'm going to blow your mind now with another big number. So in a year, the difference between on our business plan about depending on which rent we take. So if we charge CPI +1, we've got an increase of we would get 8.3 million in rents for the year. That's that top figure, it's in thousands. If we have CPI only, we get 8.2. So the difference is £79,000 difference on that 1%.
Okay.
If you then look at that over the 30 years, because you can't go back and recover it, if we don't take the CPI, if we didn't have, say, the full CPI +1, it's 3.5 million impact over our business plan. And the reason that becomes important is because we're budgeting on a 30-year programme around having to replace boilers, having to replace kitchens, bathrooms, etc. So everything we're doing isn't just about thinking about this year. We're also thinking about what does that look like for the next 5-year plan programme, 10 years in terms of thinking about hitting the energy efficiency. We've got to do decarbonisation by 2050. So we're always having to look that bit further ahead in terms of saying, have we got enough in our business plan to make sure that we can complete doing the refurbishments and the recycle and the replacements as and when they fall due, as opposed to just saying what does it look like for the next year or two.
And you might have more repairs coming up now because of our law.
Exactly.
So you have to do those repairs. So to set aside, have they thought about that as well? Or?
Well, I know, and it's that thing, isn't it, about, you know, if we, and I've given you the halfway point as well of, you know, if you do CPI +1, clearly it's half that impact. But it does have a much bigger impact than you might think it looks like in terms of per person, because we're obviously able to look at that on that sort of bigger scale. And you're right, Abov's law and others. At the moment, there's more and more legislation kind of coming in around things that you have to think about doing. So in terms of, I suppose, like you say, where are we spending the money and what's our sort of value for money considerations is, we spend our rent money obviously on repairs, we spend it on estates, we spend it on the community investment type activities we do and the future housing development. All of that's in our mix, and we'll have an inspection later in the year. And one of the things they're saying is, how have you made your decisions? What choices have you made? Where have you chosen to spend your money? What things have been taken into consideration? And some of you have mentioned really there those sort of challenges and pressures when we're thinking about what's the increase and what should we recommend for the new year. But also we'll come on to the things that you want to have fed into that discussion really with the board. There is obviously maintenance costs are going up. Because of the supplies, it is that big.
Those are the things we don't talk about, like you know, EPC work. Like, you know, there's a plan that every property needs a EPC requirement. There's all the electric upgrades.
We've got the boilers coming up as well, haven't we?
Yeah.
We're talking about the upgrades.
Compliance and decent home standards, and it's all those little things that we
and stuff.
Was it done by 2030?
Yeah, so 2030 is every property has to be at an EPCC or you're not allowed to let it. So it's not that it's a case of it's optional, you actually physically won't be allowed to rent out a property by 2030 unless you're at EPCC. So whereas previously kind of D would still be a good standard, D or E, I'm sure that's what mine is now.
So
but it is about, and it's around fuel efficiency, because obviously the better the EPC rating, the more energy efficient your property is. So it's a cost of living consideration as well as a kind of.
I mean, they're giving them a good length of time, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
But obviously everything you do, so whether it's change a boiler to make it more efficient, whether it's put in new windows, look at draft proofing, installation, etc., all of that has an impact on the energy efficiency of the property really. And now that, and it is that balancing, isn't it? Because obviously energy prices are still going up. So everybody is conscious of wanting to try and reduce where possible the kind
And
of
service charges for like.
service charges are affected by that.
Yeah. Like over 55, water charges, all these things have a
Yeah.
huge impact on service charges and affordability for
Yeah.
customers there.
So it is that balance, isn't it? It's the balance of thinking about how affordable are these increases for tenants. It's your homes, isn't it? What the impact is for you. Alongside that, having to also be aware of, we need to make sure we're still invested in the properties. To make sure they are good homes. And Arab's law is a really important piece of legislation that's come in because it is about making sure that nobody's living with damp and mould. You know, it shouldn't have had to get to the point where it did to bring that legislation in, but it's in now. We've got to make sure we're adhering to it. And you're right, when we did all the fire stuff, particularly for anyone who lived in any of the flats, we spent 2 million that wasn't budgeted to be done at the time that it was. But actually, it was really important as soon as the issues were identified to make sure that that investment went in to make sure all the homes were secure and safe for the future. So again, all these things are just, as you say, part of different considerations as part of the rents. So your role in all of this is around obviously reviewing the kind of rent proposals that are there. CPI +1 is what the government are proposing. But we want to take into account your views as part of that. What does it mean? What considerations should boards think about? We could not put on that +1%, but actually there's an impact of us doing that. And as I say, it's not something you can necessarily recover. We are trying to ensure that there's fairness and transparency in this, so you're absolutely aware of how are we setting them, on what basis we're doing it. But it's really important we hear your voices. So we've got a scrutiny group here. But we've also got a tenant on the board. So he always feeds in sort of his views and things as well and considerations. And obviously other people aren't necessarily, they might not be a tenant on our board, but they could be tenants elsewhere. And everybody else has got other considerations. So it's always a sort of a well-rounded debate. But it's really good to get your kind of views on this as well. So I suppose it's that thinking about, can tenants afford those proposed increases? You know, is that matched by an improvement in the service delivery and or investment in properties? What do you think the board actually need to hear to think about what goes into the report and what they see as part of that? And then I think the other bit that's really important is how we're communicating the decision that's been made back out to the full tenant group. So we introduced a couple of years ago the rent and service charge booklet to try and set out a bit more, rather than just be a rent notice and letter that says this is your rent increase, a full booklet saying what was the reasoning sort of behind it, what does that £1, what does the extra kind of percentage per week on an average 2 or 3 bed look like? How can you get other types of support in terms from either claim benefits, hardship funds, looking at other issues? So trying to give that broad picture out to everyone. So it'd be really interesting to hear sort of, if you've seen those booklets, did it work for you? Didn't it? Is there other things that could go in to kind of explain this without it getting so complicated that everybody switched off? Because it's a fine balance, isn't it, on something like this between information and sort of overload, really.
It just needs to be basics. So people, like you showed us figures. Now we understand the figures because you've gone through it with us, which is really good. But not everybody will understand the figures out there. I'm not putting anybody down. But it's just factual. Whereas if you just put, right, the reasons why we've had to do it, explain what CPI +1 is, and it's not Unity that's making up that, it's the government, you know, it's part of what's going to be happening. Just give them a paragraph as to why it's happened, and then just give the outline of figures. That to me would work. That's me.
Well, the service charge booklet is something that comes down to me to review. So when I do that review, I'll bring it to scrutiny. Yeah. So you can have a look to me.
But you know what would be good with the service charge? If we had somebody on here that actually lived in a flat. Because we don't get charged service charge because we all live in houses. What? Sorry, do you live in a flat?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, I get charged. Yeah.
You as well. Well, that's good because then you can give us a better view of what if it's worth your while, what you're paying for.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
It's
I'm in the ground floor, so I'm paying for, you know, the whole building.
Yeah.
But I don't use anything.
Right,
apart from the ground floor.
yeah.
I don't need my windows cleaned, you know, but
But it's
as far as
inclusive,
I'm concerned, you know, it's not really worth it, but it's part of my brain, so. It's,
But don't you get your windows cleaned anyway when the window cleaner comes out?
we don't.
yes,
So he does it?
he does clean,
Yeah.
but I don't need them cleaned, you know, because ground floor, I think.
Do it yourself,
Just
but not everybody can use it.
No,
And that's the thing by service charges, they're not an opt-in, opt-out.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, it's for.
no, and
Yeah.
I think that's right.
Yeah,
But I still think, you know, it's not really worth it for
yeah,
me,
yeah.
but I'm paying it and not complaining.
I mean, with everything the garden's done, everything, you know, it's really good, yeah, so inside the building, the carpets are hoovered every Wednesday. I don't know, every 3 weeks, I think the lawns are cut and stuff like that, so it's quite good, yeah.
We went out to view some properties a couple of weeks ago with Steve.
Yeah, Stephen.
He's so lovely.
Is he?
Absolutely. He was on the ball.
Good. Yeah, he is.
He was telling us every little nook, cranny, crack. He went through everything. He was really worth it.
That's the estate services.
But yeah, he was so
Yeah.
good. So good. And he took his time. No question was a silly question. And he took his time and went through everything with us. And I saw areas I didn't even know it belonged to Unity.
I mean, he fed back and said that he was really impressed by our estate. He was, you know,
Yeah,
pleasantly surprised at how nice the
Yeah.
estates were.
he did say
So
that.
for that to come from someone like Stephen, was actually a massive testament. Yeah. What did you think?
He said the same thing to us.
Yeah, but do you feel the same as well?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
100%. There's just one area that I think needs a bit more lighting, but it's not, I know it's not Unity's place to get the lighting done, it's the council. But from a health and safety point of view, it does need doing, of if we could give for the local council a push or something to get some external lights. So that's just me, I'd rather have it sorted before something happens,
Okay.
not just in one area.
What scheme with that?
We still find out because Maxine, who comes to the meetings, the reason why I know it's because I took her home.
Yeah.
And it was pitch black, and I went.
It's shown in Mandela Courts.
I don't know. Sue knows. Sue, where does Maxine live, please?
She lives in Mandela Court, same as
Okay.
Robert.
Okay, thank you. Well, yeah, there.
Okay.
It's really dark. So I think something needs to be done.
Okay.
You know, so, but apart from that, it was a really good afternoon. Well, I went in the morning, but I know the kid went in the afternoon, but it was a good day.
Okay.
It was worth whatever you paid him. It was money well spent.
Yeah, and you know what? Actually, I got 3 quotes, and he worked out the cheapest, but that's not the reason why I went for him. One was because he was recommended by somebody to say that she's really good at what he does, and the pre-work that he did and the plan that he had and what he presented was brilliant. And then he offers post advice as well, whether it's digitally or reports and documents, that sort of stuff. So actually, fantastic.
He said he'd come back.
Yeah.
He did say, obviously, I'm very quiet at these meetings. It's very knowledgeable. But it's very knowledgeable of what he did. Yeah, it was good. The chap that's on the board who's tenant.
Yes.
It would be good to get his views in this room as opposed to talking to the board, because he doesn't know what we think.
No, but that's why part of what you said, he will come back as a scrutiny comments.
Yeah. But it'd be good to have him in the room as well, if possible.
Oh, you'd like to invite him?
Yeah, I'd like to invite him. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Oh, wait, you're talking about yourself.
Yeah, I know, we've talked about that before, haven't we? Yeah. And then the other person is John in the room who does repairs, talking about earlier. It'd be good to have him, held accountable for what he does. It'd be good to meet him because I've not met him. But apart from that.
Yeah, so in terms of views on this then, what are your thoughts on sort of consideration that the board needs to sort of include as part of their Or what do you want us to include, I suppose, in that report to them in terms of other considerations?
Apart from the CPI.
We talked about Outlaps law earlier, didn't we?
Yeah.
So what do you mean?
I suppose it's that difference between whether we apply the full CPI plus one or whether we go lower, but obviously then you've got that impact of
Yeah.
the lost rent and things
Then
you
we
can
have
do
to
with
see
it.
what's in the coffers already. And then you can weigh it up as to, do we go +1 or can we afford to go another year with just the CPI? You've got to look to see what we've got banked already and then work out the differences.
And I can give you an idea on here. So, for example, for our surplus,
Actual figures.
these are actual figures.
Right.
If we change nothing else for next year based on what we've currently got projected, that difference in rent, the 79,000, is basically a 78,000 loss on the bottom line for the year.
Okay.
So you haven't had it, you can't spend it, basically.
Okay.
So think about that every year. So by the following year, if you haven't applied it, then actually that's 156,000 less income by the end of year 2. So that 78 will just go every single year. That's 78,000 you've not had. So it's not a 1 year reduction.
Yeah.
It's 780,000 over 10 years, 3.7 million over the 30 years.
Is CPI, is that the same as inflation?
Yes, so it's consumer price index. So it's when the government publish it every month. The only thing we always have to use is September, because September is what's used for rents. September is used for benefits. September is used for pensions. So they only use September in any year as their inflator across the board. So I say last year, it just happened. It was 1.7 at the point that it was used for September. The month before it had been 3%. The month after it was 3%. But the 1 month they used happened to be the lower one because it's always September.
It's just, I only get a state pension.
Right, yeah.
So that means that my rent increase is 1% more.
No, because this year, so they go with the higher, don't they? Because with the triple lock on state pension currently, that's been announced at 4.8%.
Oh, right. So
because it's the higher of CPI plus earnings, plus average salaries.
Right. And it's been said.
They announced it, didn't they, last month? 4.8%.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll shut up.
No, but that's an important point about the pension increase.
Yeah, no, because I feel that the pension's not enough.
Yeah.
But then I would.
Yeah.
It's not.
And you're right, and obviously if you're in a flat, you haven't just got the rent element, you've also got the service charge.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, because they're variable, if we suddenly did get a bigger reduction in costs, then obviously that is passed on, and we've had that in other years as well. But at the moment, unfortunately, with the way energy prices and other things have gone, generally speaking, they tend to be increasing rather than reducing.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got it in my head now. I know which one I'll vote on, but I'll keep quiet. Which actually is that the CPI +1 or just the CPI?
Oh, this CPI plus 0.5 as well, that, I just noticed that.
Yeah, I saw that.
Why is that?
I've just given you an idea of what the impact is in terms of that
Right.
sort of range, because obviously,
That's not for them.
I'm not thinking, I'm not stressed, but it's just.
I'm just like, I think it'll be
Yeah.
CPI.
I know, I feel like it's pretty inevitable.
Yeah.
It's gonna be CPI, I can't say it, but it's gonna be that.
The plus one,
Yeah,
the +1, yeah.
Which we said
Yeah.
is about £1 increase, did we say?
Yeah.
No, so
£1.50.
about £1 difference. No, so the increase will be, if we have the CPI +1, the increase will be, say, on an average 3-bed, about £5.70 a week
Increase.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's about £1 difference to say just CPI.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
There's a
yeah,
pound
I get
difference
it.
between CPI
And
and.
CPI
Yes.
one, yeah.
Yeah.
But the increase is 4.8%.
I mean, I guess if,
£6.48.
sorry, sorry, I didn't start knowing that. I think for me, it's more about, obviously, I've heard everything that you've said about the considerations unit has to take into account, and they're pretty, I mean, you can't really contest them, can you? Because it's like, this is the, if we can't like bring this money in, we're going to be in a situation where it's going to adversely affect unity as an organisation and everybody, including tenants. But then how do you balance that then with trying to keep things affordable? Like that's what I'm thinking about. Like, how do you balance that? Because if things are going to go up every year, how do you remain? Do you know what I mean? How do you like? Do you know what I'm trying to say? How do you strike that balance? I don't really know.
I think generally, I think the balance is, we try, I think the balance is generally across the board. So you've got, let's say for working people, they'll get increase on their salary. You see what I mean? Your pensions hopefully go up, housing benefit then will cover the remainder, the increase, etc. We're hoping that it does. There's certain impacts along the way that are positive impacts as well. So we know that we have a salary increase every year based on, you know, inflation. We know that contractors put an inflation on every year on the contract price. So we have to get that back from somewhere. But if you were on housing benefit and your went up, that would get covered by housing benefit.
Yeah, like if you're on benefits, usually they'll cover most of it, whether depending on your circumstances. Like if you're not working, for example, but if you are working, like I don't know how many people work full time and are guaranteed a pay rise, because I haven't necessarily been guaranteed one each year. Like last year we had to fight, you know what I mean, through the union. They didn't want to give us, so it's like that's not always the reality. But then I don't know, it just kind of seems like it's just sort of, and it might be a bit of an
Are you talking about the impact on unity as well, or?
Both.
Well, I think it's both, isn't it?
Yeah,
But it is that balance of the things we still want to be able to do, like the investing in properties, building homes.
Well, that means that unity may have to look at different ways of working. Is that right?
I'll give you an example.
Yeah,
So to try and find the balance, what we're doing at the moment with the over 55 schemes is we're trying to encourage them to have done with the laundry room, because most people do actually have a room for a washing machine in their actual flat. So if they don't have the laundry room, they don't pay the cost of the servicing, the breakdowns, the cleaning, and that is off their service charge. But the biggest impact is the water charges that go into that laundry room. So it would reduce their costs that way. We look at things like
But who introduced it in the first instance?
that's because
Is that
again,
is that
That's
just
all the schemes were built like that.
the housing benefit covered everything.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what was a part of the service charge, it all got included. And then bit by bit now everything's coming out. So that's one example. The other example we have where we're trying to find a balance is where we have road and call systems where people are paying for pull code, and yet you probably have 80% of the schemes that don't use them, but we're paying for a service contract.
So that's what I mean.
Monitoring contract. So we want to remove those, but say to people that we'll fit you with independent alarms, so they're just for you if you need it. The whole scheme doesn't have to pay for it.
Which is a better idea.
10%. So there's that. Then we look at things like lighting. We look for lighting that only comes on when people come into the area, so they're not on all night, they're not on all day. So they're
one that's like that, it just comes on. Inside.
So more energy efficient stuff in that way. So we are trying to balance it out.
And procuring services generally. So you know, we've procured the gas contract in the last year. We've now got a new repairs contractor. So some of these are about listening and trying to also say, what will we be charged for the services, but actually is it better quality? It's not always about just the cheapest supplier, it's actually about who's giving you the best service.
We were talking about that right before the meeting started. We were talking about the contractors and have they had a 6 month review and how good are they? You know,
so like now I'm going out to procurement for the estate services contracts.
Right.
And based on those quotes that we get back, will be based on what tenants want, what is affordable, what's sustainable, what is quality, you know, and value for money. These are all the things that we try and consider to make sure that we have tenancies that we can still let out, that they're affordable.
I mean, that's always having subcontractors work, or can things be certain things can be brought inside, or not really? Question?
No, not at all. I mean, I think it really partly depends on the size of the organisation. So I worked for a larger association before, not a massive one, it was kind of mid-size. And again, for years, there wasn't a DLO, but then a DLO was introduced, a kind of direct labour to be able to do some of the servicing items direct. And for the felt there was more control over it and it would bring the pricing down. And for our size, it'd be quite hard in terms of the physical numbers, say for gas company, because if somebody was off sick,
Have 2 or 3 families
you
in-house
could,
that could
but
do
it's back to that same thing of you've still got to hit the deadlines to get them in. If somebody was off sick or something happened, you know what I mean? Someone suddenly leaves, you can't replace them. Actually, regulatory wise, we've still got to hit that deadline. If you've got a much larger team, you've got a bit more flexibility about being able to move people off, say, one contract or address to another.
And where you're paying a subcontractor, then you'd have to look at creating that DLO, the money that's going to do that, additional cost of staffing, insurance, training, then your vans and materials.
So there's been more partnership work.
it's
Yeah, so for us, size-wise, it's probably more partnership working. So with the new repairs contractor, there's a lot more about that partnership discussion, etc.
I think having your housing officers going out has saved you a hell of a lot, because they're going out now and they're identifying things more.
Absolutely.
They're speaking to tenants more. You know, when we talk about damp and mould, like Ian's been talking about it, they're going into people's houses and can see things. So it's a quick fix. Well, not always a quick fix, but it's a starting point, isn't it? You know,
so in Q2, there was 33% of damp and mould cases that were identified on tenancy health check, and they were reported on the same day.
There you go. So that's a plus for us. And I keep saying us the full work. I keep saying us the full work.
Well, you've got party and senior in the interim.
But then, so like all these measures to try and like save money and stuff, is that realistically ever going to be reflected in tenants' rent, or is rent just always? I'm not saying rent shouldn't go up, because obviously it's not. You've got to make money, haven't you? Do you know what I mean?
Well, we're not for profit, so we don't anything we make.
Well, actually, no, you don't. Not make money in that sense, but like keep the organisation
reinvested in terms of.
So you should see it in the quality of homes.
So we'll see it, but in other ways, but it would never be seen in. Oh, actually, we're not going to whack the rent up this much this year. But that would never happen. Or wouldn't.
I mean, I think every year it's a conversation, and it really isn't just a kind of blanketed over. It's a really robust conversation, a board meeting every year.
I'm gonna say interest rate goes up. Even if you had a mortgage, your interest rate would go up.
I mean, you saw on that inflation up there. There was a year when rents went down. Rents went down for 4 years. For the -1, they went down. The year that inflation was negative. So it's not a case of it will never change, but obviously at this point in time,
I'm thinking.
There are safeguards in place. That if it increased by that much, that we would cap the increase. To kind of put a buffer in place. And I know somewhere I worked before that they did that cap. I'm not sure if it was the rents or it's the service charges.
No, it rents.
It was rents, So they put a cap on that because they thought, oh gosh, that's too much of an increase for people. So I think they reabsorbed the other percentage. They put a cap on what percentage the tenant had to pay, but the organisation absorbed the rest of the cost.
And that's what that's what happens to every organisation. No, and here as well. I think in 23-24, the CPI was 11.1, and the government said actually that is just too high. It's 7% across the board.
Is that when they capped it to like
7? Yeah. So there are some considerations in there as well about reasonableness of charges.
Because I just think otherwise, what's going to be the difference between private sector and like his social?
Well, it's still 20% on those affordable rents. It's still at least 20% lower. And on the social ones, it's at least probably 40% lower than most private rents. So those safeguards are also there because I haven't put it up there because we're below it, but there's what's called a local housing allowance.
That's
kind of the maximum that housing benefits they will pay, and that's what the private rents go to. And all of ours are way below that sort of level. So that also gives you a bit of an idea in the same area. What's the safeguard of saying this is still a social or affordable rent compared to a market rent?
Can we get a copy of these slides?
Yeah, sure.
It's Yeah, it's
horrible.
Yeah.
It's the same everywhere, isn't it? You like, and I say this like on a personal level, like you think of like just ordering food these days, you know, and you think about how much those costs have gone up.
Yeah.
And like forgetting about utilities, but just little things like going to the supermarket,
Buying food.
you know, things like that. It's like everything is just.
I feel like we have to do, like as tenants and individuals, I think you have to do the same thing in your own lives as what unit is doing. You have to look at it in different ways. To like cost and like streamline things and be more efficient. And do you know what I mean? I think about things now I never used to. Do you know, like how long to stay in the shower? Can I save money by? Do you know what I mean?
Because you have trimmed so much fat off already in the past few years. Like, what if something else comes up? That's what trim away. Like, the bone, aren't you?
I keep saying to my kids, we're on a water meter.
It's 4-minute timer.
Yeah.
People do that, you know, they do, and they have everything like really meticulous. I want to be that person. I'm not quite there. I'd love to be that person because I think that.
I mean, do tenants know that Yorkshire Water can send that pack as well?
Oh, what?
You know, I've got one from Yorkshire Water.
But I think it's a really good point about.
They give you a time.
Mostly points about how do you kind of bring out the kind of cost saving things. So Yorkshire Water have got like the packs that comes out, and you can put the timers on, but you can also put like a blue thing into the water, limit the water.
Yeah, I've got that in the.
There's some,
And the tax.
you know, a lot of the energy companies do kind of either saving schemes or kind of support and advice around sort of draft proofing. You know, just putting things like, you know, the sausage dog inside the door and other things.
You know, it's funny because I've never had the smart meters, and you get the screen. And I've never been aware of what I use.
I get anxious looking at other people's smart meters.
Reminding me like how I put it up and turned it around.
So maybe we could link is do the promotion around some of these other incentives and things.
Yeah, but
at the same time as the rent increase.
Because they're not all in one place, and if you don't know, you don't know.
But if we link it to the rent increases, maybe send it out at the same time.
I was going to the money page on the new website. And I've built a money saving expert page.
The smart meters in Hartlepool Court that worked when the builders were giving them out when they first built. Like, I tried to link it up, but they don't really. I think it said it's too far away from the
Wi-Fi router.
Yeah. So it was working at once and it stopped working. So
Was that home and court?
Yeah. I've still got it, but it's not. I try to link it up all the time, but it doesn't. It works for a little bit, then it stops working.
To know, I do like some days. I know the difference, like on a weekend when
I can see what it is.
It's like Blackpool illuminations tonight because cats are on their own, so I have to let it be like.
Yeah. So what can be done about that then? You think to get them working?
About the meters, I think probably we don't actually do the meters ourselves. It's not something that we manage.
Speak to British Gas.
If you speak to British Gas and say, I've got a meter, but it's not working, either you send me a new one out or send an engineer out to have a look at it. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd love to have a housing officer to be able to help you, but they're already biting so many fires. Yeah.
No.
That's all right.
We had a meeting a few weeks ago, and there was a tenant in the room. He was saying, Unity need to help me with my banking. Well, I find it right back at him. No, not happening.
I mean, we will if it's something.
No. He wasn't
signpost or.
He wanted you to save his money for him.
Okay.
It's not happening.
Okay, no.
It was one of those.
Yeah.
It's just like off its big one and finished with him.
Are we allowed to get like solar panels?
Solar panels, no, but well, some schemes have got solar panels on, not many.
A lot of
It is
them
potentially a saving thing for the future that's being looked at and sort of the way funding that government have talked about. Some properties though, we've got them mortgaged to banks. So we raise our money by mortgaging the properties to the banks in the same way we would give mortgage. We have, if you bought a property privately, you'd have a mortgage on it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So we borrow money from the bank and we mortgage, literally.
You paying a mortgage on a property?
Yeah, essentially.
For
No, so what we do is they have it as security. So if we don't pay them back the interest on the loan they've given us, they could potentially take the properties that have been mortgaged to them. But so what it means is on some of those properties, you're just not allowed to put solar panels on because it's just one of the terms and conditions.
Yeah,
that they
like
don't.
that ultimate.
But when they've contacted me, these solar companies, and I've gone to inquire, and they ask you what sort of property you live in, and you tell them, they say, no, we're not allowed to touch those.
Yeah, because it'd have to come to us, so we'd have to make the decision as the owner of the property.
So it's something that you'd consider that it was like in your interests, basically.
They already are doing.
And
Yeah, so some of them, we're having some surveys done at the moment across quite a lot of properties, particularly the ones that need bringing up the higher level. Yeah, stock condition survey, but also the ones that need to reach the CPCC for 2030 to see what measures need to be put in place to achieve that.
It's little things like that, like if the tenants knew what you were doing, that would be good, then they wouldn't ask you the question.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a bad
Well,
question. I think the problem is until we've had all the surveys done, we can't tell you which schemes may or may not even have them or if they're even suitable. Because if someone's in North Face,
You're looking out,
a
you're
solar
looking
panel.
at.
Yeah, you got your charger.
Yeah.
The laptop's gonna.
Because you'll say you're looking at,
Yeah.
can't you?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Charger.
So it's that okay? Is there anything else that
No.
you wanted to, or has that helped in
That's fine, it's really helpful.
an idea?